Convergence Culture, Where Old and New Media Collide is a book by media analyst Henry Jenkins. Within the book, Jenkins attempts to explain the phenomena of media convergence. Most specifically, Jenkins highlights the concepts of media convergence, participatory culture, and collective intelligence through popular culture examples. In order to understand the basics of Jenkins's argument, one must first understand what he means when he talks about convergence. According to the book, convergence is the flow of media content across platforms along with the cooperation between media industries, and the idea that the attention of the audience transfers between multiple media to gain a full experience. In other words, Jenkins is saying that content can travel globally, across different media, across different economies, and across borders. However, Jenkins argues that this is only possible through participation. Convergence is a shift in the culture of media consumption and requires an active social audience, which includes both consumers and producers. In order to better explain convergence, I offer up the weblog created by Henry Jenkins to coordinate with the publication of this book. Although the original medium of the content is print, this blog allows for an extension of the content to a different platform, as well as allows for social participation from consumers, as well as an active input on the discussions by the producer himself. As Jenkins explains, one of the most important aspects of a convergence culture is the active participation of the audience. This is described as a participatory culture, which is contrasted with the passive media consumption, which is associated with the past and the traditional view of one-way mass media. Instead, the line between producer and consumer is blurred as they interact together. Through the social participation of the audience, Jenkins explains that consuming media has become a collective endeavor. Since there is too much information on any one topic for one person to know, when consumers share and cooperate with one another, they create a collective intelligence, which allows for the collective of consumers to have greater knowledge and power when working together. In Chapter 1, Jenkins extends this idea of a collective intelligence and describes knowledge communities, which are social groups that organize around different ideas or events. Jenkins argues that new forms of community, such as these virtual ones, are being created due to the breakdown of the traditional community. However, I would disagree and argue more for their addition to and not replacement of traditional community. Jenkins described these knowledge communities as temporary and voluntary. Consumers join these collectives for a certain need and leave when that need is fulfilled, which seems apt for the consumption of an ever-evolving media. In order to better describe these types of communities and their collective knowledge, Jenkins turns to examples of the phenomena of spoiling the reality television show Survivor. To briefly describe spoiling is the act of media consumers attempting to discover the secret content of a certain media production. The example of Survivor focuses on the fans' attempts to discover the contestants' names, the locations, and the eventual winners, all things that the producers wanted to keep secret. The process of spoiling created a need for collective intelligence and knowledge communities. Jenkins describes how bits of information were collected and shared in order to collectively think about an issue. In addition, rules were put in place to evaluate information and regulate the dynamic community. Some individuals would put in enormous amounts of time and effort to contribute to what most considered to be the challenge of spoiling, as well as there were those who were less invested. In addition to explaining the collective intelligence seen in spoiling, Jenkins also describes the opposition of the expert paradigm. Essentially, experts who have specific knowledge on one subject ruin the democratic collective of a knowledge community, as in the case with the Chill One incident, where a poster had so much knowledge that he was seen to have ruined the fun for everyone else. Although knowledge communities are generally seen as democratic, with collective intelligence equally distributed, that is not necessarily true. Some groups would be private in their information sharing. It is through these practices that one can see the idea of knowledge as power and the possibility of hierarchies in the collective. For me, these inequalities make these knowledge communities more representative of society. Another concept that Jenkins elaborates on within this book is effective economics. In order to explain this concept, he focuses on the example of American Idol, another reality television show. Effective economics refers to the idea that in order to encourage consumers to be loyal, brands must find a way to connect with the consumer's emotions. If they love the product and have a relationship with it, they will be loyal. American Idol is an example of effective economics. Many companies were so closely integrated with the series that their brands were associated with it. Someone's emotions about Idol could affect those brands. If they are loyal to the entertainment they watch, there's a possibility that they will be loyal to the associated brand, which is divergent from the idea that one-time consumers should be the targets of marketing. However, Jenkins explains that when a brand seeks an emotional link with its consumers, there are always potential backlash. People who are extremely invested in a brand and who work to protect it are called inspirational consumers. These individuals incite backlash as a form of checks and balances against corporate changes or inadequacies within a brand. Jenkins also describes the phenomena of transmedia storytelling. This concept is described as world-making, or the extension of media content across different platforms which all together tell a complete story. The example given was The Matrix, a world described throughout movies, comics, video games, etc. Through these different media, consumers could be immersed in different levels of the created world. I agree with Jenkins that there is yet to be a fully successful realization of transmedia storytelling. Perhaps it is due to the fact that there is yet to be a mass demand for such a widespread media experience. Not everyone wants to have to read the comics, play the games, and watch the movies to fully understand the narrative. However, I feel that there is great potential for the future to include more types of media in distributing content. I also feel that although Jenkins focused on the producer's role in creating a transmedia story, that one can see that consumers also contribute to world making. Many fans of different media products create their own websites, write fan fiction, or compile encyclopedias of knowledge on the worlds offered to them. Despite that some greatly depart from the original story, there is much content offered by consumers as producers. Overall, I can clearly see the convergence that Henry Jenkins describes within this book. Content is being distributed across all different media, and that content is being consumed in a much more social manner than ever before. However, I think that Jenkins' focus on entertainment shows just how limited this convergence has been so far. I think that media convergence should and will continue to expand into other aspects. An example would be knowledge communities created around a collective intelligence that would be helpful for problem solving, like political issues or economic struggles. Also, I can see transmedia storytelling and collective intelligence becoming integral parts of learning. Learning in this new convergence culture should not be only from multiple other participants, but also multiple mediums.